All right, so let's talk about each of these different types of bonds in a little more detail. So first, let's talk about ionic. And we're going to talk about each of these a lot more, okay? So this is just a little bit of an intro. So with ionic, we said it's a metal and a non-metal. So now let's talk about, and we said that the electrons were transferred. So how are they going to be transferred? So let's review some from last chapter. So remember we said metals have low ionization energies. So that means that it's easy to remove an electron. So the metals are good with giving up an electron. So metals, they're going to give up an electron. Okay? So remember, metals like to form cations. Okay? Non-metals have high electron affinities, which means they really want to add an electron. So non-metals are going to want to receive an electron. So what happens here is we have our metal and we have our non-metal, right? The metal is willing to give up an electron, so it's going to give up the electron. The non-metal is going to take the electron. So metal gives up the electron, non-metal is going to take the electron. So what happens is here our metal is going to become a cation, and our non-metal is going to become an anion. So this is what it means by transferring. But when I say it transfers the electron, it's not just going to run away. It's not going to just be like, okay, here's my electron and peace out. Now, after it gave up the electron, it has a positive charge, and my non-metal has a negative charge. So they're actually going to stay really close together because of this positive-negative attraction. So that's kind of what you see here in my chart. My Na gave up the electron to the chlorine, so now Na is positive, chlorine is negative. And so now they're going to be right next to each other, hanging out in my little cube here. Okay? So you need to know ionic is a transfer of electrons from my metal to my non-metal. All right, now let's talk about covalent a little bit more. Now covalent is two non-metals. Okay, so it's two non-metals. And non-metals have a high ionization energy. So that means they don't want to remove electrons. They don't want to give up an electron. They're like, no. So they have to kind of come to a compromise. So for the two non-metals to be able to bond together, neither one of them want to give up an electron. So what they kind of do is they say, well, fine, we'll share. We're going to share it. So think about if your friend asked you, hey, do you mind if I borrow your chemistry book? You're like, well, I really need my chemistry book to study. And they're like, well, I'm trying to do my homework, but I need a book. So what they would say is, well, how about we just share the book? So you would kind of put the book in between you guys, and you would share the textbook. Okay? So what's happening with covalent is they're going to share an electron. Now I kind of hinted at where's the best place to put the electron. This is my two non-metals over here on the left. So if these are my non-metals here on the left, and I want to share them, then the best place isn't for me to have it way out here. If I'm trying to share a book with my buddy that's right here next to me, the book shouldn't be way out in front of us or way up above us. We need it to be, in the middle. So we don't want it too far up above, and then we don't want it to be favored to one side. I don't want the book all the way over here versus over here. So the best placement, if we were going to share it, would be right between us. So we could sit next to each other and put the book right here. Okay? So when we're talking about sharing, my two non-metals are going to give up an electron. They kind of give up an electron to put in the middle. And then they're going to share it. And because they're sharing it, that's what's going to keep them together. So they're going to be attracted together because they have positive, this is a negative, and they're attracted because they want to share that electron. So the electron is going to be shared between my covalent. Okay? So that's the big difference. So ionic transfers, covalent shares my electrons. Okay? And we won't really talk about metallic much more after this. There's a whole field of study that's going to talk about metallic. It's called inorganic chemistry, and you can take that class. I just want you to be aware that there is a third type. All right. Now, before we start talking about naming, there's going to be specific naming rules and how to write the formulas for ionic. There's going to be specific naming rules and how to write the formulas for covalent. But before we learn how to write the formulas and how to go from a formula to a name, we need to first talk about, well, what is a formula? What is the structure of a formula, and what information do I get from the formula? So on the next lecture, we're going to talk about formulas.